From separate paths to a shared spotlight, Faye and Yoko's story didn't begin with headlines, rumors, or grand introductions. It began quietly, in a way that most meaningful stories do. Long before their names were ever spoken together, they were moving through the industry on entirely different trajectories, each focused on building a name, a craft, and a sense of stability in a world that rarely slows down for anyone. Faye was known for her calm presence. She carried herself with a kind of grounded confidence that didn't need constant attention. In interviews, she spoke carefully, thoughtfully, choosing her words as if she understood how easily they could be misunderstood. Her work reflected that same steadiness. There was a sense that she knew who she was, even when the spotlight grew brighter. Yoko, on the other hand, entered rooms with a different kind of energy. Lively, expressive, warm. She was the type people noticed immediately, not because she demanded attention, but because she brought life with her. Her laughter was easy, her reactions genuine, and her connection with fans felt natural and unforced. Where Faye was steady ground, Yoko was movement. For a long time, their paths ran parallel without touching. Different projects, different circles, different timelines. And yet, as often happens in this industry, coincidence began to blur into pattern. Fans were the first to notice. They always are. It started with small things. A shared event here. A background appearance there. Nothing that screamed significance. But those who paid close attention began to sense something familiar in the way they existed in the same space. There was no awkward adjustment, no visible effort. Just ease. Comfort. People didn't talk about chemistry at first. They talked about calm. About how the atmosphere shifted when both were present. About how neither seemed to compete for attention. They simply occupied the space together, each remaining entirely themselves. As time went on, these moments multiplied. A few more sightings. A few overlapping schedules. Casual acknowledgments that felt natural rather than staged. And with each instance, the narrative grew, not louder, but clearer. This wasn't something being forced. It wasn't being hidden either. It was unfolding at its own pace. What truly changed everything was the moment they shared the spotlight. There was no announcement, no joint appearance planned to make waves. Yet, when they found themselves at the same event, standing within the same frame, something shifted. Cameras lingered longer than usual. Conversations slowed. Fans watching from afar felt it instantly. Not excitement, but recognition. They stood near each other without clinging, without distance. No exaggerated gestures, no avoidance, just presence. And somehow, that presence spoke volumes. It became clear then that this story wasn't about sudden closeness. It was about alignment. Two people who had grown independently, now finding themselves in the same chapter, without needing to rewrite who they were to fit the moment. From that point forward, everything was viewed through a different lens. Interviews where their answers echoed similar values. Separate conversations that hinted at shared priorities. Choices that suggested maturity over impulse, intention over noise. Fans didn't rush to label what they were seeing. Instead, they observed. They listened. They noticed how Faye seemed more at ease in spaces where Yoko was present. How Yoko appeared grounded, centered, without losing her warmth. It wasn't about changing for each other. It was about balance. What made this story resonate so deeply was what it refused to become. There was no dramatic reveal. No emotional confession delivered for effect. No attempt to control the narrative. In an industry that thrives on spectacle, Faye and Yoko offered something rare, authenticity without explanation. They continued their individual journeys, taking on projects, attending events, speaking in their own voices. Yet, every now and then, those journeys intersected again. And each time they did, the connection felt stronger, not because it was growing louder, but because it was growing steadier. Fans began to describe it not as a moment, but as a progression. A natural evolution from separate paths to shared understanding. From independence to quiet partnership, whatever form that partnership might take. And perhaps that's the most powerful part of their story. It doesn't ask to be defined. It doesn't demand interpretation. It simply exists. In a world where visibility is often mistaken for meaning, Faye and Yoko remind people that some of the most significant connections don't announce themselves. They reveal themselves slowly, through consistency, through respect, through the way two people choose to move forward without losing who they are. As more time passes, fans continue to watch, not with impatience, but with appreciation. Whatever Faye and Yoko are building, whether personal, professional, or something quietly in between, it feels intentional. It feels earned. From separate paths to a shared spotlight, their story isn't about coincidence. It's about timing, growth, and the quiet strength of letting something real unfold without rushing it into a shape it isn't ready to take. And that's why people care. Not because they're being shown something extraordinary, but because they're witnessing something honest. As time moved forward, the attention around Faye and Yoko didn't fade the way fleeting trends usually do. Instead, it settled into something steadier, something more thoughtful. Fans stopped asking, "What is this?" and began asking, "Why does this feel so genuine?" That shift alone said everything. What stood out most was how neither of them seemed rushed by the curiosity surrounding them. There was no urgency to clarify, no pressure to deny, and no attempt to dramatize what was unfolding. In an industry where silence is often seen as strategy, their silence felt different. It felt peaceful. Behind the scenes, people who worked around them began to notice small but telling details. Not secrets, not scandals, just patterns. The way they checked in with each other during long schedules. The way conversations flowed easily when they happened to be in the same room. The way neither tried to dominate the moment when the other was speaking. It was mutual awareness, quiet consideration. Faye, who had always valued emotional stability, appeared more open in subtle ways. Her smiles lingered a bit longer. Her posture softened in shared spaces. Yoko, known for her expressive warmth, seemed more centered, more grounded, as if she had found a rhythm that didn't require constant movement. Fans began to reflect on their own experiences while watching them. Many said it reminded them of connections in real life, the ones that don't announce themselves loudly, the ones that grow through shared understanding rather than dramatic declarations. And that relatability made the story resonate even more deeply. There was a moment, subtle but unforgettable, when both of them were asked separate questions about growth and balance in their lives. Their answers weren't identical, but they pointed in the same direction. Patience, trust, choosing peace over pressure. It was in those moments that people began to understand that whatever Faye and Yoko shared wasn't accidental. It was intentional, even if it was unspoken. As opportunities continued to arise, they didn't suddenly appear everywhere together. Instead, they maintained their independence. Separate projects, separate goals, separate identities. And yet, when their paths crossed again, it felt less like coincidence and more like alignment. That balance became the foundation of their story. Two people strong enough on their own, choosing not to compete, not to overshadow, not to disappear into each other. Just walking forward, aware of one another, respectful of timing. In online spaces, the tone of conversation changed. Instead of speculation, there was appreciation. Instead of impatience, there was support. Fans didn't demand answers anymore. They trusted the process. They trusted the people involved. What made the shared spotlight meaningful wasn't visibility. It was restraint. The ability to exist in public without turning connection into performance. In a culture obsessed with exposure, that restraint felt refreshing. As months passed, the story didn't peak and collapse. It evolved. Slowly, naturally, just like the strongest connections do. And perhaps that's the quiet lesson behind Faye and Yoko's growing story. That not every meaningful connection needs a label. Not every shared moment needs explanation. Sometimes the most powerful thing two people can do is continue showing up as themselves, side by side, without needing to tell the world what it means. From separate paths to a shared spotlight, their journey continues not because it demands attention, but because it earns it. And as long as that remains true, people will keep watching, not out of curiosity alone, but out of respect.